Next 15 years, 20% of our country is going to be above 60 years of age. We can build all the fancy hospitals, but what about caregiving? What about caregivers? And what if I'm not able to pay for all of that? How do we take care of ourselves? 20 years later, I'm going to be 70 years of age. Who's going to take care of me? And the insurance penetration in India is less than 4%. So the trust deficit in the insurance sector, especially in health insurance, is only worsening. We humans are living longer. There was a time when somebody retired at 58 or 60, and it was very common to hear somebody passed away before they were 70. So if more Indians start living longer, but if more Indians don't have enough income, where is the wealth creation going to happen? So 3 generations are under the same roof, all because of a large emotional guilt baggage and not having adequate economics viability to say that, hey, somebody can take care of them or can they be provided for. So the reality is everybody feels suffocated, and especially the elderly. Why do we feel that our children are going to take care of us? Like the way we pined for taking care of our parents. Our kids, generation Gen Z especially, are probably far more emotionally detached. I'm not saying they're cold, aloof, or they hate us. But what do we always promise ourselves? When I make enough money, I'm going to go back home. This is the new home. This has become home and we cannot fit in back there. But our parents are saying, you know what, I fit in, but I don't fit in your home. And I think that's a dilemma that we always will struggle with. If we don't start investing today for 20 years hence, then we are going to land up in a trouble where our healthcare bill is going to be far higher. 7 crore Indians file income tax returns every year, and that's just another surrogate number to look at it. And probably about 2.5 crores actually pay income tax. So which means out of 140 crores, this is the only number which can take care of themselves. So I'm saying it's a very low number, right? I mean 2%, 1.5% of Indian population can take care of itself as we age. Who's going to take care of the 98%?
Hello, I'm Afrida Rahman Ali, and with me is Dr. Srinath Sridharan, who is a strategic counsel to leading corporates. He's also an author, a columnist. With Srinath, I am going to talk about quite a few things that he's written about as well in a number of publications. And one of the recent articles that he wrote, which caught my attention, is about aging parents and absent children. And I want to have this conversation because this is not talked about a lot in this country. Elderly care is something pushed to the sidelines. But before I get started with this conversation, I must tell our viewers here that Nature in Nurture is a podcast I started to cover various aspects of parenting. We have indeed covered over the last 6 to 7 episodes a whole plethora of issues, starting with teenage tantrums to screen time to the impact of social media influence on children. We did also delve into the issue of career moms and balancing work with kids. A lot of it was about the period of adolescence and the mental health issues. So do check out those episodes and give us your feedback, since a lot of parenting issues, the current generation and what they deal with their kids have been dealt with in those episodes. Today, as I introduce Dr. Srinath Sridharan, I want to begin with a very important question, Srinath, about the country that we live in and the demography of this country. We are under the impression that we are a very young country. And, if you can give us an overview of where we stand and how is the elderly care situation in India right now and how is it going to be?
So I think, Afrida, thank you for having me on your show. Right. And it's a very important, relevant topic because nobody speaks about it. Today we are a young population, 50% of India, 2/3 of India is less than 35 years of age. But in the next 15 years, 20% of our country is going to be above 60 years of age. We don't have the social infrastructure or the social security, so to speak, whether it's economic, financial, or it is actually physical infrastructure. We can build all the fancy hospitals, but what about caregiving? What about caregivers? And what if I'm not able to pay for all of that? Who's going to pay for all of that? What about the next generation? They are going to be busy taking care of their own economic viability. So in that sense, I think Indian demographic dividend, I don't think it might end up becoming a demographic knife, so to speak. It's going to cut both ways.
Okay.
As much as all of us are, let's say, passionate or emotional about our parents and children, we also have to start planning, saying that how do we take care of them, or how do we take care of ourselves? 20 years later, I'm going to be 70 years of age. Who's going to take care of me? I think if each of us put ourselves in such a position, I think we'll have a very honest no answer. We won't have answers. We will want to think that our children will take care of us. And I think that's an injustice that we will do to the next generation. India grew up with saying that somebody at home will take care of somebody else, because we all grew up in joint families. The joint families gave way to nuclear families. Today we also have dysfunctional single unit families. If I add to that layer, 30% of India is going to be urbanized in the next 5 years. We take great pride in saying our cities are growing, but look at the cities, the way they are, concrete jungle, quality of life has gone down. So every time somebody falls sick back home, the person who's earning a livelihood in one of those top 10 cities have to rush back home to take care. We don't have adequate medical care, and I'm saying quality medical care, as we would expect from a city. And city life is not conducive enough because they are living far away from the workplace to bring the parents for better healthcare. So the nature of this conversation about how do we take care of healthcare, we have not spoken about it. Financially, if you look at it, insurance doesn't cover old age insurance as well, if they have not taken insurance first. And the insurance penetration in India is less than 4%. And we all also have seen and heard enough anecdotes from our family and friend circle how difficult it is to get, I think, the insurance payouts once you have hospitalization and 100% doesn't get paid out. So the trust deficit in the insurance sector, especially in health insurance, is only worsening. We all from outside think the entire system is corrupt and nothing moves. And we will be both right and wrong. So unless regulatorily somebody wakes up and fixes that, all this conversation about great quality life and great quality living, I don't think is for any of us. That's a worry. The richy rich who can afford to pay for enough service of skilled labor and staff to take care of us, I think we'll be lucky. But in general, the quality of talent that is needed for caregiving, even for physical ailments, I'm not talking about complex emotional issues, mental issues, and or any disease prone, you're recovering from cancer, any of those, it needs a specialized training.
There's also this whole, the tragedy of the situation is a lot of elderly are also abandoned completely, or they feel abandoned. And we don't have an old age home culture here, at least in this country. So for the problem of abandonment, do you see it increasing over time? Because from what you tell me, it seems as if we are growing apart, like parents and children over the generations. That close-knitness that we had is also lost.
So I think I feel it's going to widen further. One, in our rush for capitalistic growth, wealth creation. So, and I'm not doing any moral judgment here whether it's right or wrong. It's needed to survive. So the other aspect of it is, if suddenly 80 crore Indian youngsters today, who are probably in the age between 15 and 65, as the International Labour Organization calls productive age, if they don't work, who will work? The other challenge that we have to ask is, do they have work?
Sorry?
Do they have work?
Do they have?
The unemployment issues. So which means everybody is in a rush to do multiple things to create some kind of earning, because we humans are living longer. There was a time when somebody retired at 58 or 60, and it was very common to hear somebody passed away before they were 70. Today it's even very common to hear people who are in their 80s and having a decent life. They're mentally agile and physically okay, frail, but still taking care of themselves. So if more Indians start living longer, but if more Indians don't have enough income, where is the wealth creation going to happen? And where is the social security net going to come from? So that is why I'm saying that our generation will have to start looking at who will take care of us if we can't afford to pay for it. I think that's a larger policy question we need to ask. I wish very soon in some parliamentary session they start thinking about this, because we don't have the conversations around middle class India. We have policies for the poor India. We have policies for capitalist India, which is the wealth creators, the industrialists. But what about middle class India? Where are the hospitals? And why do people do, for example, why do people don't go to certain type of hospitals? They feel they don't belong there, right? They feel that, oh, it's not for me. I'm middle class. I'm slightly better than this. I need better healthcare. But it has become expensive. And people, the previous generation did not want to go or feeling abandoned. They did not want to go to senior citizen homes because they were almost like orphanages, if I can call it the senior citizen orphanages. But today you have builders where they're building actually what they call a silver
paradises.
Paradises.
But is there a healthy solution you feel for the elderly to live within a community where everybody is of the same age group and maybe have some constructive creative
Possible,
activities?
quite possible, because it keeps them mentally and emotionally agile with support given from each other. But we're all human beings where we are going to have our usual vices, the greed, jealousy, comparisons. I have this more and she doesn't talk to me well. And
I think would it add to their sense of abandonment? I mean, I know we can't generalize. I mean, each person.
Correct. So it will be there. It will continue. But the fact is, in let's say, for example, physical infrastructure, can there be anti-skid tiles? Let's say bedrooms which can be converted into medical units in case of an emergency. All that are already coming up in a lot of those senior homes. Are there any social activities, dramatics, music, chess, food catering catered specific to individual taste and choice? All of that coming there. But the reality is, unless it comes at large scale, the cost of economics, again, it is going to be elitist. But very classic, if you look at Pune, if you look at Coimbatore, Coimbatore has been a pioneer in this. For the last 15 or 20 years, they've been having senior citizen communities being built. So they're not one single tower with 40 people. They're actually communities with farming that is done, organic crops that they grow there. There's an amphitheater, everybody's religion is respected. And yet, when the kids come back, there's always a kind of a guest house where they live within the community and yet not distract and disturb others. But the reality is, I think we all have to make peace with it. Comparing how...
As of now, the mindset, that has to also be, because the way we are conditioned, it is almost... used, like in my family at least, they say, हमें तो old age home भेजा जाएगा, almost as a
punishment.
Thing about punishment कि तुम लोग कहाँ देखोगे, हमें तो old age. So it is almost like a sad, a kind of a commentary about how we will be. It is not taken with a lot of pride. So there is a huge mindset, change that would require, if what you're saying that these are societies coming up, but unless that change in mindset happens, you can't have these societies and no takers for them.
So let's look back 1980s. Very simple, right? I mean, the concept of intercaste marriages was a taboo and shock, and honor killings were common in many parts of the country. But we've kind of normalized it. Today, the very fact that you can't make, even in a vegetarian household, cooking eggs, but the grandkid doing that was accepted as normal. So a lot of those changes have happened. The women going out in some of these middle class homes to work was seen as a taboo. I mean, you could work as a teacher, that was accepted. You could give tuitions at home, that was accepted, but you could not go to an office. So I think it's also society. And here I think the mainstream media, entertainment, movies, I think that's where we're going to play a lot of conversations, that it is normal, it is civil, and it is socially acceptable.
Let's talk about this middle generation. You have kids growing up, children, and you have aging parents. Now, once the children grow up to a certain age and they become a little independent, parents also, of course, tend to feel a little free of that whole, constant micromanaging things. And then comes the parents. So do you think, there is that sense of, okay, now I can't again take another, because after all, aging parents become like children, let's face it. Elderly care is a huge area. It needs that much attention or focus or prioritizing. You can't just have your parents with you and then only delegate everything to the staff. Where do you see, is there a golden mean? Because on one hand, yes, if your children have grown up, now why don't you look after your aging parents? It's just supposed to fall in line, isn't it? But it doesn't normally fall in line. I don't see that happening.
See, life is not a straight circle, straight road, right? I mean, so things are very unpredictable. I think what you mentioned is for people who have the means. I think the majority of India doesn't have the means. In case somebody is sick, the reality is they're stuck because they can't give the quality that they want to give as healthcare or support. And yet, their household cannot function unless they get out of the house to earn a living. That's a reality. 2 incomes initially to pay for both, including the medicines and all of that. So, which is why I think the reason I mentioned that we needed conversed in the mainstream politics is you can do all the schemes to say that we'll provide healthcare, we'll provide all that. But the moment you're back home, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to take care of them? The hospitalization is only one part of taking care of a senior citizen when they are not well. And if it is somebody is not well for 20 years, we don't realize that it impacts the next generation. That household never shuts shop at all. There is no vacation, there is no holidays, there is no celebration because they're constantly on, literally on steroids, so to speak. It impacts the health of the caregiver, invariably the lady of the house, because
it falls on her shoulders.
Culturally, we think she has to abandon everything. She doesn't go through her own preventive health care.
That's what I was going to ask you. That first, you put your career on hold maybe for kids, and then again the elderly care also falls on the shoulders of the woman in the house. And her own health takes a complete backseat.
That's because she doesn't have time. Because she's so busy right from morning till night and taking care of different generations and different needs and different customization. Where is the time, energy, bandwidth for her to think, or even the mental space, let alone the financial bandwidth, for her to say, okay, I need to now go for my annual checkup, or I need to ensure that I don't get into anything, which is curable, which is preventive, if I can find it on time. So I think there's a lot of conversation that we need to have in the public health.
You've written about it in your article that there's also this challenge of, even if you want to say have your aging parents with you, it's not always that simple. Sometimes your parents are in small towns and they're used to a certain kind of lifestyle, and it just doesn't fit in with the fast life of, say, a city like Delhi or Bombay, where they don't know anyone, they become insignificant and nobody knows them, and somewhere that life of dignity which they are used to also feels compromised. So they're not going to just move in with you wherever you are. That becomes a problem as well.
So one, I think they become emotional prisoners. Where even if they come in and stay with their children, assuming let's say in Mumbai, the households, apartments are smaller for large number of middle class. So which means if there is a patient at home, so one room literally is blocked for them. So that's a reality. But yet life has to go on, which means the younger kids in the generation are watching television, but they're told, kam rakho, volume kam rakho, don't do this, don't do that. So 3 generations are under the same roof, all because of a large emotional guilt baggage and not having adequate economics viability to say that, hey, somebody can take care of them or can they be provided for. So the reality is everybody feels suffocated, and especially the elderly. Their entire social chasm of their friends, their routine, it could be for a walk, it could be the park. In India, in Bombay, if you talk about park and garden, I think that itself is a stress point. Where are they?
They're completely missing. But how do we plan our retirement, and what's the best course forward? Like for someone like me in my late 40s, now if I have to think about what will life be like in my 70s, and if you manage to live that long, how am I going to plan it? What should I be doing? How will I deal with the loneliness? How will I deal with being away from children? And what is the planning that I should be doing? Is it just financial planning, or is it more than that?
So financial planning is only one aspect. It can make you less guilty about spending what you're spending, whether it is those parks and gardens and holidays and all of that. The other one is the intergenerational mindset. Why do we feel that our children are going to take care of us? Like the way we pined for taking care of our parents. I'm using the word pined because it's more emotional. Our kids, generation Gen Z especially, are probably far more emotionally detached I'm not saying they're cold, aloof, or they hate us, but they're far more detached to say,
More practical and
practical is again the way of life. If we
Yeah.
if we accept it, it becomes practical. If we
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
accept it, it becomes emotionally heart-wrenching, saying that they
No,
abandoned
it's
us.
because it's seen as a sign of weakness almost. Like
Yeah.
if you display emotions or if you're overwhelmed with emotion, they control their emotions a lot more
Yeah.
than needed.
Yeah. So, which is why India, if you look at urbanization, why is that statistics of 30% urbanized is important? Is we are all going to become a city of migrants. If I look back at Mumbai, we are third generation migrants, my family, but in fact, it's still migrants. But luckily, the Constitution of India permits us to go anywhere and work for a living. But what do we always promise ourselves? When I make enough money, I'm going to go back home. But then this is the new home. This has become home, and we cannot fit in back there. But our parents are saying, you know what, I fit in, but I don't fit in your home. And I think that's a dilemma that we always will struggle with. So financially, if we can do financial planning to say whatever, but I think somewhere we need to start building these silver communities, which can take care of our physical need in terms of fresh air and healthy walking around, healthy food and all of that. Social and cultural mixture. Third is also the medical need. As we age, if something happens to us, our needs suddenly very, very change. So are there going to be care providers, medical or non-medical? The reality is India today doesn't have that.
Have you heard this system? I guess I read it somewhere. Maybe I think it's in Japan, where you can bank hours that you give as a service to the elderly, and then you can encash those hours when you are old. Have you heard of this system? It's an amazing way that they, you just go and spend time.
Yeah, but Afrida, because it's a
with the elderly.
geriatrically
Sometimes
majority
they crave for
country.
that. They
Yeah.
just crave for company.
Yeah. Japan is a geriatric nation. So they didn't have any other alternate. For example, the new geriatric nation, which is doing a lot of these innovative stuff, is actually Korea. So they are a huge geriatric population, but there is no caregiver. So Korea had the same one. As civilization and their growth happened the last 30 years, so one generation of Koreans have migrated west. So they have far greater problem than what we have in India. Of course, the numbers of citizens are far lower than India. So this entire generation is in the US and Canada. And parents are aging, they're 70, 80 plus, and there are no caregivers. So they've now, the government of Korea formally has started with Indonesia, Vietnam and others to send formally, there's a caregiver visa which are provided. So the challenge is again, India as a society is not ready to allow for outsiders to come in to care for us.
Yeah.
When we are already struggling to even allow our own within the country, we still have our own differences in terms of language and culture and food, all of that. So I think the first practical step is going to be, I think, do we allow somebody else to take care of us? Which we do allow probably out of sheer tiredness in an hospital to actually do it in a senior citizen home.
Yeah. So 3 things that you pointed out that I gleaned from what you said: the physical aspect, the social aspect, the emotional aspect. I see that there is no emphasis on some of these common, ailments of the elderly. For example, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or dementia, for example. There's a lot of content now that we watch and we see these stories. And I know of someone who runs a facility to diagnose these cognitive ailments. But that again compounds the problem. You may be physically very healthy, but your cognitive abilities are compromised.
Yeah.
So again, in a country like ours, I think we are completely, we are in a very nascent stage of getting these also included in our elderly care support system.
So that's a very well raised point, Afrida. We look at what is tangible. If somebody looks sick and let's say fractured hand or a leg, you know that somebody is sick. But we don't play emphasis, somebody could be ill with a liver problem, somebody could have emotional ailment, somebody could have, let's say, mental trouble. We don't play emphasis because we say, wo to dikhta hai, dikhta hai.
Or we dismiss it saying, wo to budhape ka, it's
Correct.
aging issue.
So I think more we have conversations, I think we'll have to normalize it. And then we'll have to evolve specialized service for that. But again, I go back to that fundamental one. Who is going to pay for it? Because as a country, we don't have a large expense on healthcare. Our expenses as a GDP, percent of GDP is less than 2.5%, which is far lower for 1/6 of the world's population, but we don't have 1/6 of the world's wealth. So which means if we don't start investing today for 20 years hence, then we are going to land up in the trouble where our healthcare bill is going to be far higher, which means the word that you use, abandoned feeling, we might actually have abandoned parents rather than abandoned feeling. Because people will say, I can't pay their bills, I can't take care of it, I'm earning only 50,000 rupees, but their bills are 30,000. What do I do? And I'm only 30 years of age. What do I do? And I think that's a reality which is staring at us.
You have written a book on succession, how families should plan this. And in that connects, my question to the issue of how do you think parents, when say an affluent family, now they have enough resources. So when they plan their retirement, can they at least in those cases where you have resources, even if you may not be affluent, plan it in a quid pro quo sort of a way with the children that, listen, this is how it is going to be, this is the amount of wealth that you will inherit, and this is how I would like the system to be with you around or something. Do you see that sort of a quid pro quo system working between parents and children, or is it a naive question?
It's a nice question.
Naive, I said.
No, it's a nice question, not naive.
Okay.
Because some of the families have a couple of good rules. Never give anything to the children as inheritance as long as you're alive. So it's only after then. Because you don't want parents to be abandoned when the shares are transferred to the children. And we have seen this play out in a large Indian business family. You don't want parent to be abandoned. Two, I think very clear that any sense of wealth being transferred, unless it's ancestral, you have every right to write it off. You can give it to charity. You don't have to give it to your kids. In the Western world, it's far more common because it's institutional wealth and all that. Give it under 2-3 generations. In India also, we will see some of those emerge. The third one is, I think, very important. In Indian families, they recognize that happiness and contentment is far more important. So which means that while the wealth can also bring us together and give us great access to material things, it can also break us a lot. And India has had its share of enough controversial, high-profile business families which have been there and not there at all now, all because of wealth. So the reality is, what are you going to use your wealth for? Some use it for spirituality, some use it for happiness, some use it for building greater success. And very soon, I mean, this is something that I wrote a couple of weeks ago. I called it OMG, and it's not oh my God.
Okay.
I'm calling it as ownership, management, and governance.
Okay.
So the Indian business families are actually started thinking of OMG. The first generation, when it starts, it does all the three. It owns as a shareholder, it manages as a CEO, it also governs, sitting on the board. The usual family and friends join the board. Correct? As a generation matures to the second and the third, they realize I'm educated, my son went to Harvard, my grandson has gone to Yale. And they say, you know what, Dadaji, you started the business, you went and worked in that gown, you set up that factory, but after all this, I don't want to do that. Today, we have the ability to hire a CEO to run it. So which means I don't want to do the M.
You start outsourcing.
You start outsourcing. I don't even want to do G because now I'm an American citizen. If I were to sit on the board, I have certain conflict here, all of that. I don't want to even do the G. So let our family office CEO, who's a professional, sit on the board on our behalf. But the O, the ownership, because the financial benefit of this can accrue to me, not necessarily in my direct capacity. It can be a family trust, it can be whatever accounting and taxation structures. So I think as generations pass by, India will also evolve this OMG. And I think this OMG concept is also there in middle class. And I'll tell you, in a simple family setting. 40 years ago, middle class India was probably lower middle class or even lower income group. So you did everything at home, right? I mean, including your atta was crushed at home, you bought the wheat and did all of that. Then you did most of your things yourself, whether it is doing the jadu, pocha, bartan, washing the dishes. And I'm talking about in India where there were still washing machines and all of that available, and the refrigerators were available from the 80s. But today, you outsource it, right? Today, most of us outsource parenting to a nanny, and we also expect the teacher to become the quasi-parent during the day.
And tutors. And
Yeah.
all
So
of
again, this is the same feeling, right? You're saying that governance, which is moral science. Once upon a time, in our joint families, the grandparents were our moral teachers. They were the governance experts. They kept us on track.
that. Yeah.
So, but today we are outsourcing it. We are outsourcing it to YouTube. We are outsourcing it to Google Baba. So the OMG applies to as much as a large, wealthy Indian conglomerate business families to any of our families.
Yeah, I have seen this in my own circle of friends that, like I said about the middle generation, what they would do is say you want to buy a property, but you can't buy it with your current resources. You will rope in your parents' resources, have them move with you. So there's a unspoken quid pro quo that you pull in resources for us. After you, it's going to be ours. And in the meantime, during your period of aging and old age, you get looked after. I mean, you get to live with children. Is that a win-win situation, or do you see loopholes there?
So it depends. I mean, there are both sides of pros and cons that we hear enough anecdotes. We have seen parents do that, and they're forced to kind of take the emotional baggage that comes along. Why do we think that somebody who's 60 doesn't like their peace and quiet and don't want to live alone as a couple? So the husband and wife might be in their 60s, might say, you know what, I want to live alone. I have my own driver, maid and all of that. And whenever I want, I will come back to visit you. Or whenever I want, I'll go wherever kids living abroad or just on a vacation. Why should I live with you all the time? And why should I become the quasi-nanny for you, for your kids? And we've seen one generation of NRI parenting, right? I mean, grandparents in India go abroad very clearly. They're kind of expected to do the nanny duty, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But today's generation, today's silver, would actually even voice it out, saying that I'm not interested in taking care of your kid. So I'm very happy being here.
But what if the same children turn around and said, okay, too bad, you never came in, for us to assist. So now when you're old and aging, don't expect us to nanny you.
So I think that's a very fair point. So if that were the case, so which is why I am saying that our generation, yours and mine, should be very practical. Don't expect it. Don't expect our children to be taking care of us. But again, how many of us have the economic might to be okay with that? And I think we are a very, very small minority. And that's a challenge that we have. If you are saying that 7 crore Indians file income tax returns every year, and that's just another surrogate number to look at it, and probably about 2.5 crores actually pay income tax. So which means out of 140 crores, this is the only number which can take care of themselves. So I'm saying it's a very low number, right? I mean, 2%, 1.5% of Indian population can take care of itself as we age. Who's going to take care of the 98%?
So do you feel the onus lies on the powers that be, on the elected governments to look at this? I mean, we do have schemes like Ayushman Bharat and all, with their health cards that give you free treatment up to a certain amount. But then that is also pegged, it's predicated on what your family income is.
Correct.
So it excludes a whole lot of
So that's why I said the middle class is not included in that. So I said that politicians like the economically weaker section because they have to take care of them. Yes, socially inclusive, we have to bring them up. But nobody speaks for the middle class.
Yeah, so that the middle class is always the one that gets left out.
They're completely left out.
Yeah.
And middle class is tired lifting the weight for 30 years economically and being honest, paying taxes and everything. And they realize I have to live under 20 years and there's nobody to take care of me. So I think this is the time to start thinking about how do we build a national corpus. It'll need money. How do we build infrastructures and networks? As much as number of colleges and universities we are building, how do we build caregiving senior communities in almost every city across the country? How do we think through that? And can we think the MIG, LIG, HIG route even there?
Okay.
So which means that you don't need fancy 2,000 square feet homes, but can you build a nice 2-bedroom apartments which are geriatric friendly, which can be converted into medical assistance.
So you're saying it's already time to think about that now?
Private sector has started thinking. Coimbatore, Pune have started doing in this small form for middle class pricing. I'm not talking about the one that we have in North, which is HNI and Ultra HNI. But there are enough and more examples that are already there. Coimbatore as a city has enough healthcare institutions and hospitals, including super specialty hospital. So if you are in one of those communities, they even have tie-up with those hospitals, including, let's say the children are abroad, there is a kind of a financial deposit that's kept as part of them living there. So in case of an emergency, the protocol kicks in that they're taken to the hospital, everything.
Oh, wow.
So
So systems in place.
Systems in
basically.
place. So I'm saying that systems are available today to even take it to public healthcare.
Yeah.
The moment,
you need that foresight.
Yeah.
You need to recognize that there is this gap and then, work your way towards it, right?
Correct. So I'm
Fill
saying that
gap.
it is possible because we have seen Japan, we are seeing
Their
Korea
best
going
practices
through.
abroad
Korea,
can
we
be
are seeing
adopted.
go through it. So if Indians are going to live till 90, and we are going to have, already we are saying that we are more prone to obesity, diabetes and related health issues. So where is it going to lead us to? So I think instead of what can be a strategic strength today as a demographic dividend, we don't want it to be a strategic weakness as a country of old, sick folks. So we'll have to start investing time, effort, and we'll have to bring it to mainstream conversations. Saying it is okay to be old, it is okay to be unwell, but there will be a system of caregiving taking care of it. Today we're talking about, we have normalized 30 years ago, if you left your kid in a creche, you are, even as middle class, you are seen as
You're
an
an
evil mother.
Villain.
How could you do that, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing, I'm asking this question, saying if you have to leave your aged parents who are not well, but for a better caregiving, probably public-private partnership, where the state kind of brings in grants for it, those who cannot afford. I think we should look up, start planning it today.
Yeah.
We will get somewhere 10 years down the line, we might have the first successful model.
Yeah.
And I think enough examples across any families, across, I think, hierarchy. Speak to the wealthy industrialists, speak to middle class Indian, across different cities, the same problem. And that article came up with more and more people that I heard saying that
there's
they're
some
dropping.
wonderful lines, in fact, that when I read through this, that's some of the things that that aging parents get reduced to phone calls and forwarded reports. And there's another one that you have written, quite a few good lines.
The last para.
The one about time. The generation that can afford everything except time.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's an issue. You may be able to afford a lot for your parents, but you just don't have the time.
You can
to
write
go
a
sit
check,
with
you can send the
them
money.
But you don't have the time to be with them, to give them company.
So the last para actually says, why did we do all this? For whom? And the so-called progress,
Cost of ambition in our times.
in the cost of our progress, we have left the very people that we wanted to actually take care in the first place. Because all of us, when we start, we always say, I'm doing this for my parents, I want them to be comfortable. And in the 40, 50 year of our career, we realize that we are so tired, we are not able, or time starved, that we are not able to provide for them. And also, let's don't forget, one aspect that we have not discussed, but which is also getting more and more important, is we are also seeing generations where the generations themselves are 60, and their parents who are in their 90s are still alive, and they have children and grandchildren. So who is expected to take care of whom?
Okay.
So even if they had the money, physically it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I think that's an honest truth that society needs to accept and be forgiving. Otherwise, we've passed judgment saying that they're very cruel, they have left it. Somebody is 65, 70, they can't physically lift somebody and take care of it.
Yeah. I think you made a very good point, and I conclude with that, even as I share with my viewers the book, The A to Z of Succession Planning. This is, of course, as
Family
you said,
and Danda.
For families with businesses and the kind of succession plan that they should think about. Thank you so much, Mr. Sridharan, for joining us today, for giving us your insights into this very meaningful conversation. Thanks very much.